because it's going to be spending 9 months until May 2027 in the sign of Cancer due to its retrograde motion. So I'm going to be breaking this down for all 12 signs as well. But at the beginning of this video, I'm also going to be reflecting a little bit on Pluto in the sign of Aquarius as well, because I feel like with the current events going on, we have to be actually talking a little bit about Pluto in the sign of Aquarius. And all I want to mention about Pluto in the sign of Aquarius is that what's very important is that Pluto is trying to break down our society, and it's trying to kind of like divide people into groups. Why is that? Because remember that when it comes to Aquarius, this is about brotherhood and sisterhood. This is the sign of community. And community is something that is kind of like the ultimate ideas of modern social life, right? So we band it together based on shared habits or political beliefs or lifestyle choices, identities, something to do with the common causes, right? As Pluto moves through the sign of Aquarius, the cracks in these collective shields are kind of like widening a little bit. So Pluto doesn't destroy what is authentic. It dismantles what is kind of performative or hollow or driven by certain type of hidden control or power, like power hunger. So it is exposing the cold reality of tribalism. So that modern sisterhood and brotherhood was never about, true human love, but more about an ideological conformity. And of course, the ultimate goal here is that we're going to have to come together as people. Aquarius governs network, system, groups, and the ideal of kind of like a universal unity. And when operating at a high level, it creates equal rights and progress. But Pluto's job is to expose the shadow of Aquarius, which is called sometimes about dogmatic detachment as well. So under Pluto in Aquarius, brotherhood and the sisterhood often comes with kind of like a bit of a fine print, really. You are my brother or sister only as long as you think, speak, or kind of like vote exactly like me. And obviously that means there is no true love behind that, right? So, of course, recently we had the Jupiter and Pluto opposition as well. So if Aquarius is the group, Leo is the individual's heart. So while Pluto strips away the illusion of kind of like this artificial solidarity or society in Aquarius, Jupiter in Leo expands the antidote. So it becomes unconditional, kind of like the heart-centered truth. So Jupiter in Leo reminds us that true nobility doesn't come from belonging to the right group or reciting the right, slogans. It comes from a personal character, warmth and loyalty, and the courage to see people for who they actually are, not what type of label they wear. So, Pluto in Aquarius is forcing a total reboot of how we form bonds. It is purging shallow identity politics and performative allegiances and that virtue signaling brotherhoods. It forces us to ask whether, if the group requires you to abandon your heart, is it really a community? So, I think the takeaway of Pluto and Jupiter opposition right now is that many of us are leaving behind an era of a superficial solidarity. So Pluto in Aquarius will continue to dismantle every collective structure that somehow demands compliance over compassion. Aquarius is something to do with people who feel outcasted, segregated, as rules don't fit the narratives, right? So Aquarius is inherently oriented towards the future. It's a bit of a system redesign sign. It's an objective truth. It naturally sees the arbitrary rules and the performative norms of the present. So when you don't fit in that standard mold or refuse to pretend that, that the flawed narratives make sense, there is going to be a collective reaction to it. And that collective reaction can marginalize you. So, therefore, what really happens is that Aquarian people often feel that they don't fit the mold. And then they are going to be kind of creating new groups, for example. This is a bit of a painful paradox. If Aquarius governs the group and you feel like that you cannot be an individual within that group, and people are going to be attacking for who you truly are, then you are going to end up feeling like an outcast. So Aquarius operates outside the established matrix. Those who carry strong Aquarian energy, rarely fit these pre-packaged narratives of the mainstream society. So, and then Pluto comes around and elevates the shadow, right? The fear of the outsider. So groups often demand that you kind of like give up of who you are to fit their narratives, right? And the differences threatens the illusion of security. So anyone who points out the flaw in the rules becomes kind of like an instant threat. So therefore, Aquarius is, I don't want to say that it's a fake sign because, but there is a fakeness behind it. Listen, I'm an Aquarius myself, okay? So I'm not trying to say that Aquarian people are fake, but Aquarius can represent the fake belongings. So with Pluto here, it's about the true belonging. Many people join sisterhoods or brotherhoods not out of real love, but out of a deep-seated fear of being cast out. So I might not agree with them, but maybe I'm just going to keep silent about something, right? And Pluto shows us that the person who is exiled for refusing to follow a blind narrative is often the healthiest person in the system. So anyway, I just wanted to actually talk about this a little bit, and what's very interesting is that Uranus is in the sign of Gemini. And, that could be a bit of a battle of the mind because Pluto in Aquarius exposes the cold conformity of the collective, and Uranus in Gemini targets the nervous system of that modern society. The media, the speech, the language, the information flow. All these are Gemini territories, right? The platforms that we use to be able to communicate. And I think we are seeing an escalated effort by institutions and media corporations and governments to kind of control the narrative. I know that, for example, the media was in the pocket of the government in Hungary for a good 15 years, and they didn't allow the opposing party, for example, to go to the TV and then speak to the public. So he had no choice but to go around in the country and then kind of like talk to people in person. The same happens in Mexico, and so on. So, but I'm sure this is happening everywhere in the world. So therefore, it's something to do what we are allowed to say, what we are allowed to think or hear. And of course, this can create a bit of a fear. Am I saying the right things? And so forth. So what I'm trying to say is that Uranus in the sign of Gemini, the shadow side of it is kind of like a bit of a censorship. And again, Uranus is the modern ruler of Aquarius. So therefore, it has got something to do with feeling like an alien, feeling outcasted. So I'm being outcasted for something that I have said, done, or because I've got a certain type of opinion on something. Of course, this can create no public safety, right? So it feels like that we can get controlled with the Uranus and the Pluto trine. And even if it's a trine, it can have a shadow side of it as well. The beauty of Uranus that, you cannot get permanently gagged. Uranus is like the lightning bolt of liberation. So the harder certain type of centralized forces try to censor language or policing your thoughts and so forth, kind of like Uranus, the more explosive it becomes, and then it's going to start thinking about counter reactions or counter actions as well. So this could create new channels, alternative channels where you are allowed to say whatever you want. With Pluto being in the picture, it's about exposing the machine as well. And with Uranus, it becomes a bit of a whistleblower. So, it's kind of like exposing the algorithm and so on. So I just wanted to kind of like touch base on this a little bit because of a lot of recent events that that have gone down recently. And yeah, I just wanted to touch base on that. But today's major topic, going back, all I want is that we people come together and then we accept people for who they are. That's all I'm trying to say. That would have been my message. But so the major topic that I would like to talk to you about today is Ceres, because Ceres is entering the sign of the sign of Cancer on the 12th of August. So that's going to be taking place tomorrow, but it's going to be staying in the sign of Cancer until May 2027. So I'm going to be giving you the dates in a very short time so that you can note them down. And I'm going to give you the sensitive degrees as well so you can work with them. And I'm going to be giving you a very short description at the end as well for each rising sign. So, but before we do that, have you signed up for my drawing test course that is going to be starting on the 5th of September? This is going to be a 6-week long course, and I'm going to teach you how to read drawings, how to gain or how to spot personality patterns, how to spot past events, as well as future events in your drawings, and what type of illnesses you draw into your picture subconsciously, which you might need to be able to work with. This is a super good technique. If you are a certain type of a practitioner and you work with people, surely this can benefit you a lot, because you just sit down with your client, you ask them to draw a picture in 5 minutes, and then the problem is right in front of you. You don't have to be beating around the bush to get something out of that particular client. You will be able to see that. It's like a little bit like the consultation chart that you can be erecting for the moment the client enters your Zoom channel, for example, and then see what type of rising sign we've got there, what type of aspects do we have towards the rising sign, and that gives you a clue about the person, why they are here, what do they want to talk to you about. But let's get going. This is available on my website, AstroViktor.com. It's right on the front page. So if you are interested, check it out and join us to get way better at our personality map type of discovery. But let's talk about Ceres in the sign of Cancer, our major topic of the day. So the key dates that you might want to be taking notes of. Ceres enters the sign of Cancer on 12th of August 2026. It stations retrograde on November 21st at 23 degree of Cancer. And then it direct stations on 10 degree of Cancer. And then it's going to be exiting the sign of Cancer on May 21st, 2027. So the sensitive degrees are the 10th and the 23rd degree of all cardinal signs, which are Cancer, Capricorn, Aries, and Libra. So if you have got any planets on 10 or 23rd degree of these cardinal signs, then you are going to be pretty much impacted by this. So do let me know in the chat box below what is happening there. So let's talk about Ceres a little bit. Ceres governs how we give and receive care, how we manage vital resources, how we set boundaries around dependency, how we handle cycles of loss and replenishment. So in Cancer, these themes center directly on around your domestic sphere, accepting emotional burnout, for example, as a default state. So on one hand, the meaning of this is that we're going to have to be reevaluating the caretaker role here, examining what area of life you might be overgiving or mothering others at your own expense, or accepting emotional burnout, like I said, as a default system. It's about redefining what home and safety means for you. So having to reassess what actually makes a space or an environment safe or stable, but also it's about emotional and physical nourishment. So addressing habits surrounding comfort, food, domestic routines, and even financial nest eggs, really. And because Cancer represents family and your lineage dynamics as well. So it might be about unpacking inherited patterns around support, guilt, or boundary enforcement between family members as well. So I think what could be happening with Ceres in the sign of Cancer is that you find yourself stepping in, for example, to handle domestic duties or kind of like an emotional crisis management, or you're trying to create this safety net for family members or your loved ones, but it could lead to silent resentment. So Cancer retrograde phase creates this friction that highlights this unsustainable dynamic. And instead of defaulting to immediate kind of protection or rescue, the focus shifts to setting clear boundaries around what level of support you can realistically provide without draining your own pocket or your own well, really. Or it could indicate, because Ceres in Cancer can encourage slowing down to inspect the foundations a little bit. So rather than rushing into let's say, a new living arrangements or agreement, or this period favors auditing your current space. So fixing the structural issues, decluttering emotional attachments, for example, to physical objects, or redesigning the space to serve your true kind of like sanctuary or your rest or your nest, really. But Ceres in Cancer ask for this self-soothing as well. So this is going to be a cycle that prompts a shift from temporary comfort to some type of sustainable routines, establishing, I don't know, consistency when it comes to meal or sleep habits, creating, boundaries around your downtime, learning to meet your own emotional needs directly, and you're going to have to be able to talk about those. So, Ceres is also the representation of agriculture, food supply. It's a mothering type of archetype. This is where the caretaker role comes in, because Ceres represents the ultimate mother. And this is the cyclical nature of loss and grief and replenishment. The reason why it is representation of loss, because according to mythology, her daughter got abducted by Pluto. And she went through a lot of trials to be able to get her back, without realizing that actually her daughter, Persephone, fell in love with Pluto and she became the queen of the underworld. So eventually they made an agreement, because she was grieving so hard that she started punishing human beings, and she brought um, agricultural issues to Earth. So Zeus, seeing that, he decided to kind of like try to meet halfway with her. So the solution was that Persephone was going to spend 6 months with her mother and 6 months with her husband. So that's how the seasons pretty much kind of like got born. So now what's very interesting about this, that Ceres made a conjunction to Mars on 28th degree of Gemini, which is opposing the galactic center. Now, some people call it as galactic center, but some also calls it as the navel of the Earth. So that's an interesting approach to it, right? Because when you think of the navel of the Earth and Ceres making a conjunction to Mars there, and Mars cuts things away, and then Ceres is obviously something to do with mothering. So you are getting cut off the navel of the Earth. What it kind of tells me is that it's something to do with detaching yourself, for example, from certain type of groups or certain type of environments and local neighborhoods, because you want to be focusing on your self-care, right? And that's going to be Ceres moving into the sign of Cancer. Now, this is the reason why I wanted to talk a little bit about Pluto and Uranus' role in this, even though Ceres is not necessarily making a major aspect to them. Ceres will be making a quincunx to Pluto. If you work with quincunxes, that's great. If you don't, that's okay too. But it really feels like with that Ceres and Mars conjunction on almost on 29 degree of Gemini, it's kind of like the final showdown of you know what, I'm going to be a little bit more careful. I'm going to be less careful of how I speak to myself as well as to others. Now, also what's interesting is that Ceres and Mars have moved into the sign of Cancer almost at the same time. Right, so Mars and Ceres are going to be making this conjunction, or kind of like walking hand in hand in the next couple of weeks. So this is a bit of a mama tiger type of energy. It's like fighting for home, fighting from home as well, fighting for my family, and fighting to be able to create emotional boundaries. Yes, this can create a lot of passive aggressive behavior as well, and defensiveness. Of course, when I love someone, I want to defend them. When I hate them, I want to attack them, right? So, how do I want to save someone's life? Maybe I'm going to be doing that by emotional manipulation, especially when the needs are not stated directly or when the needs are not being met. So, of course, Ceres will be spending here 9 months. So, we're going to have to be really looking at how we are caring for others as well as how we are going to be taking care of ourselves. And it really feels like that Ceres is echoing somehow early 2025. Let me tell you why. Because Mars went retrograde in the sign of Cancer and Leo, right? From late 2024 through early 2025. And then Mars went direct on 17 degree of Cancer. And it, on top of my head, it started its retrograde period on 6 degree of Leo. That's exactly where the Pluto and Jupiter opposition took place. That's another reason why I want to speak about Pluto in Aquarius and Jupiter at the beginning of the video also. So now Ceres is kind of like the continuation of, together with Mars, it's continuation of that path of Mars, what it started pretty much early 2025. Now, I think what we might be seeing in the next 9 months is that there's going to be a huge focus on agricultural supply chains, or food distribution, or housing stability as well, or a certain type of international aid matters. I still believe that the property prices will start dropping, which already has started anyway, but maybe it's going to get accelerated a little bit. I think there's going to be a lot of focus on domestic policies, border securities, territory and land debates, and a lot of emotionally charged kind of like nationalist sentiments. I think we might be moving away from overgiving to kind of trying to establish these healthy emotional limits with other countries, with family members, with our loved ones, with our neighbors, and so forth. And everyone is going to focus a little bit more on on their own security. Maybe it's about renovation projects or real estate transitioning and so forth. But it's an ideal time to kind of like looking at the inherited wounds around mothering, childhood conditioning, family guilt, family secrets as well. So these are some of the topics that could be super important. Now, Ceres is going to be straight away making a square to Neptune in the sign of Aries, and then later on it's going to be making a square to Saturn as well. So, Neptune in Aries creates often grand promises as well as kind of like a bit of an illusion. So, illusions around supply chain, right? Or illusions around resource independence. But the square from Ceres exposes, for example, supply vulnerabilities. Or I can imagine focusing a lot more on water contamination, or ocean related supply chain disruptions, where idealism collides a little bit with kind of like the practical needs. I think in previous videos I mentioned before, but I have been really thinking about investing into water for multiple reasons. And this is also a confirmation to me. But, when it comes to Neptune, that's a bit of a savior complex. So surely this is going to be triggering, the charities, the humanitarian aid. Of course, sometimes it's a well-intentioned matter as well, right? Because I'm trying to help someone. But with a square, it is still creating a friction. Maybe people are going to say, why do we need to help again, for example, and so forth? Or where did that fund come from? Ceres, like I said, it represents grief as well. So realizing that a living situation, a family dynamic, or security net wasn't as solid as we have imagined. Uh, or we can be struggling to differentiate between healthy compassion and self-sacrificing guilt. So you may feel drained by trying to rescue, family members or maintain peace at the expense of your own needs. Now you can really think of it as on a country level as well. We are kind of like helping someone out in another country while our, I don't know, gas prices are just going up and up and up, and we cannot afford buying petrol anymore. So this could work that way as well. But also with Neptune, it's the trying to soothe the emotional burnout. And often with Neptune, we do that through avoidance and passive aggressiveness and, idealizing the getting away from it all, rather than kind of like trying to fix the immediate issue there. Now, Ceres will be making a square to Saturn as well. And I think that those are strict governmental regulations or even tariffs or certain type of legal controls placed on housing, prices, land, food production. Um, I can definitely imagine tighter restrictions of borders, immigration, family reunification policies. So I can definitely imagine that. And I think the cost of living pressure on families and housing markets and domestic infrastructure, I think those are super big topics. For example, when we think back to that 2024 and 25 period that I mentioned earlier, that was a time when Spain in Barcelona, they decided that they wouldn't allow um, um, such expensive Airbnb, right? Because Spanish people were complaining that they can't afford buying a house. In another country, that was also a time when they decided that they would put double taxation on non-European countries because they kind of wanted avoiding them buying a property there. Because again, the people of that country could not buy properties anymore because everyone started pushing up the prices quite significantly. So that's how I'm kind of like seeing that Ceres is now, because it goes retrograde in the sign of Cancer, it's all going to be under review as well. When it comes to Ceres and Saturn, it's a bit of a tough love transit, really. So you are forced to stop enabling family members and giving them a bit of a no, giving them their harsh reality, and taking on heavy caretaking responsibilities that aren't yours to carry. Again, that could be something that I regret doing later on. So there is a lot of financial audit potentially happening here as well. How much I can stretch myself to aid or to give aid to other people. So now that's briefly what we might be able to expect with Ceres in the sign of Cancer. So again, the sensitive degrees are 10 degree of Cancer and 23 degree of Cancer. You might be able to give approximately about 3-degree orb on each side, but my experience is that surely you are going to be pretty impacted if you have got a planet on the 10th or 23rd degree of those signs. Why is that? Because we call them as stationary degrees. And the stationary degree means that a planet tends to be spending weeks there. So therefore, it has got more time to kind of like influence your chart there. Okay? So now, let's break this down. An example for water investments, looking at water companies. And one of the reasons why I believe that water could be a significant issue in the future is because AI consumes a lot of water. And apparently last year, AI used more water than us humans altogether. So therefore, water supply issues could be coming up until 2030. That's what they predict. Yes, there are certain type of like they are trying to figure out ways of not allowing this to happen. And Elon Musk is working on certain type of solutions, but we will see whether it's going to happen or not. So looking at water companies, for example, might be a very smart idea because we do know that we have got water issues, and in many countries we don't feel it, right? But clearly we have got water issues, and obviously the contamination of the water as well. So that's why I believe that looking at certain type of water investments might be a smart idea. Again, let me just make that clear. I do not take responsibility for your investments. But astrologically speaking, I think this might be a good field to kind of go down on. Now let's break it down for all 12 signs. So if you are here, and then you can just pop it into the chat box, Aries 3259, that would be much appreciated. But for Aries rising sign, this is going to be happening in your 4th house. So that's the base of your chart. The 4th house is security, property, parents, your private sanctuary. Because Ceres spends an extended period here with that retrograde cycle, so you are reviewing your foundation. It's kind of like a bit of a cosmic microscope there, right? So it's about restructuring where and how you feel safe. So during this transit, you may find that long-standing family obligations, unaddressed domestic frictions kind of like rise to the surface. And Ceres governs how we nurture and how we handle loss and separation. So you could be evaluating whether your current situation kind of like truly nourishes you, or if you have been acting as more of an emotional kind of like shock absorber for everyone else around you. This could indicate that you are having to take care of a sick parent of yours, for example, or because Ceres represents loss and grief, unfortunately, this could indicate a loss of a family member as well. But remembering that Ceres is squaring Neptune and Saturn in your 1st house, right? So with Neptune, this could be a period of confusion regarding where you want to anchor yourself versus who you are becoming. Because with Neptune in the 1st house, you have got right now an ideal version. You've got a vision. You should have a vision of where you want to be in a certain amount of time, right? So you might be idealizing, for example, a move, or you might be idealizing that, oh, finally I'm going to be independent. But then you realize with Ceres retrograde that your emotional roots need kind of like practical care first, And Neptune can really drain you with Ceres due to those family obligations. And it's a bit of a domestic martyrdom type of archetype. Then Ceres runs into Saturn, which is a sobering moment. So that's a reality check. Hits, right? Saturn demands self-discipline and accountability. So you can no longer hide behind passive-aggressive family dynamics or ignore the structural issues in your home environment. This is going to be about a hard choice. So am I going to set, these emotional limits with my loved ones, or am I going to be choosing myself, or am I going to be choosing my family? Basically, that's the bottom line there. Now, Taurus rising sign, if we can just pop in Taurus 3558. For Taurus rising sign, this is happening in your third house. And the third house is a bit about your daily get and go, get around type of house. It's an immediate environment, communication patterns, communication platforms, siblings, your friends even, and your local community. And Cancer brings this deeply emotional quality to how you process information, how you speak your truth, how you interact with those who are super close to you. So with the Ceres being here for an extended period of time, it's about nourishing your mind. It's about cleaning up your local connections. So you might realize that your daily environment, for example, the way you commute, the immediate workload, or how you talk to yourself, or how you allow others to talk to you is actually emotionally draining. So if you have been suppressing your true feelings, let's say to keep the peace with your siblings or neighbors or your daily contacts, then Ceres retrograde will bring these suppressed feelings to light. So yeah, now it's squaring Neptune and Saturn in your 12th house. So these are subconscious anxieties and unsaid family baggage that is kind of clouding your daily thinking. And you might misinterpret messages, for example, or feel a sense of mental fatigue, when where old fears kind of slip into your day-to-day conversations. And this could really talk to us about passive aggressive communication, for example. And we might want to tune out through escapism, especially when the daily life gets a bit too demanding, because the third house is daily life and the 12th house is a little bit more about avoidance. Now, and then squares Saturn. So this is when we have to be formalizing certain type of mental discipline, right? Saturn in the 12th sign tells you that you have to confront these hidden self-sabotaging patterns. While Ceres in the third house says that speak up about your needs. Tell people what you need help with. Tell people that you need help from time to time, and so forth. So this is about setting hard boundaries around your mental availability, saying no to draining daily tasks or family gossip or local drama. Uh, it's about you trying to create your peace of mind, basically. Let's move on to Gemini rising sign. That would be 3904. If someone can pop that into the chat box, please. So this is happening in your second house, and that's your earned income, your resources, your assets, but your values as well, your self-worth also. So Ceres connects here financial stability often uh, to your sense of emotional safety and physical comfort. So for Gemini rising sign, it's always money gives them comfort, basically. That's going to be the bottom line there. So during this extended period of retrogression, you are doing this major audit of your relationship with money and security. So am I holding resources out of fear or scarcity? Or am I overspending, I don't know, on home comfort items, for example? Because we want to be filling an emotional void there. So Ceres comes here and then asks you to look at how you nurture yourself, kind of like on a practical level. So you might review your budgets, reassess your income streams, reevaluating what you truly value. And then if you have been undervaluing your work or giving away your energy for free, for example, then this retrograde cycle will highlight where these leaks are. And it is in square to Neptune and Saturn in your 11th house, which is another financial house anyway. So with Neptune, this is a financial illusion involving friends and group ventures and social circles. So therefore, there is an invitation here to be extremely careful with lending money to friends or investing in something vague, an idealistic kind of like group projects or an idealistic future. Maybe it's a community that you were part of and you trusted, might show up as more unreliable. So therefore, Ceres retrograde is going to ask you to protect your personal bottom line, to protect your wallet. And then Saturn comes into the picture, which is in the 11th house, often about social obligations. So Saturn demands to restructure something in your groups, right? Or the groups that you are part of. And maybe you have to be setting very firm financial boundaries with those friends and groups or cut ties with contacts who kind of like trying to take advantage of your generosity. So, but also it's about ensuring that your long-term goals align with your current financial reality rather than funding a dream that might be a bit of a stretch or funding everyone else's dream but yours. So therefore, financially, you are not moving forward. So let's move on to Cancer rising sign. That would be 4217. So, of course, that's happening in your first house, which is you, which is potentially deeply personal. You know, this is about your physical presence, your vitality, your body, the core way you project yourself to the world. And this extended retrogression of Ceres here is about self nourishment, self care. It's about time to get healthy. It's about time to lose weight. It's about time to kind of like feeding your soul with something that you truly enjoy. And maybe for too long, you have been doing the role of the mothering towards others. You have been taking care of everyone else while placing your own physical and emotional needs on a back burner. And then this series is going to tell you that you have to be able to stop that. So how are you feeding your own body, your mind, your spirit? That's going to be a major question there. And you might feel this strong urge to kind of like redo something with your diet or looking at your rest patterns or kind of like the daily physical care, right? So I'm going to start putting sunscreen, for example, on my face and so forth. It's time to dismantle the habits of earning love through self sacrifice and learn how to receive the care that you deserve. It's not just about giving the care, but it's about receiving, being able to receive that as well. And often a Cancer rising sign has got major issues with that. Now, Ceres squares Neptune and Saturn in your 10th house. So with Neptune, it's a bit of a confusion or a burnout when it comes to your professional life. So especially if you feel like that the work that you have been doing is kind of like burning you out, then unfortunately it could show up as physical signs within your body as well. Right? It's a bit of a it's like when you care about what happens at work, but the workplace doesn't necessarily care about what happens to you. And it's a harsh reality comes around. And then you realize that, you know what, I have been putting these extra time and work to make this business flourish. And then they don't necessarily care at all. So why do I have to put in the extra time? Right? So one of the questions here is whether you are sacrificing your physical well-being maybe for vague promises or status or approval at work. And when you really need their support, they might not show up. So this is where Saturn comes into the picture. And then again, it gives you a reality check in your career, right? Saturn is about responsibility, and Saturn can come across very harsh, sometimes restrictive as well. But the workplace is restrictive towards your needs. So somehow you need a time off, for example, and then the workplace says, no, you cannot have a time off. So this is when you realize that I have to be setting strict boundaries with bosses, clients, the career obligations, and somehow it's about learning that you cannot sustain professional growth if your physical baseline is pretty much depleted. Let's move on to Leo rising sign. That would be 4608. So for Leo rising sign, this is happening in the 12th house, which is the representation of your subconscious patterns, solitude, and a little bit of a spiritual rest as well. This is very quiet for you, most likely. It's a little bit about stepping back from the spotlight and to dig deep behind the scenes and then doing a lot of emotional maintenance. It really feels like that you are kind of like processing grief, processing a loss in your life, and you are ready to release old emotional baggages. You know, the 12th house is where we hide things. So, including suppressed grief, old family conditioning, unspoken fears of abandonment. So, it feels like those are going to be coming to light. And yes, you might feel this stronger need to retreat or a lot more quiet time at home, or maybe you are ready to get rid of some of your bad habits as well. Maybe, you know, it's like often because of pride, Leo. We want to be pushing through exhaustion and we start ignoring our emotional fatigue. So think of Saturn and Ceres square, for example, as an emergency brake. So it's forcing you to rest. It's forcing you to address those deep-seated issues. But of course, Ceres will be making the square to Neptune first, right? So that could be a sense of with the Neptune and Saturn in your ninth house. So that could be a spiritual or philosophical confusion, right? We've got these ground beliefs, ideological promises, a long distance plan, uh, all can feel ungrounded or disillusioning. And with the 12th house, you're trying to escape this emotional reality, often by chasing abstract ideas or distant goals, but somehow you feel disconnected. Maybe feeling disconnected from a country where you are, feeling disconnected of something that you study, or feeling disconnected from a guru as well, because it can feel like that it's like a false prophet. So there could be a lot of awakening. Now, the awakening surely comes with Saturn, right? I mean, it could even indicate that certain type of legal matters that we can get into, or harsh realities about the true nature of that guru, of that teacher of ours, and so forth, right? Saturn in the ninth house is really demands this rigorous logic and discipline, which of course can be clashing with that need for a quiet kind of like intuitive rest that you need, right? So therefore you need to have a bit stricter limits on your schedule, ensuring that those studies or spiritual endeavors are kind of like not disturbing your mental health, your inner peace, your resting period. I think you need to give yourself the permission to retreat, to rest without guilt. Think of Saturn, for example, as the ruler of your seventh house and the ruler of your sixth house, right? If we are not resting, then we are we are burning the body out. Or if the relationship is having too much demand on our personal life and disturbing our spiritual practices or resting period, it's within the body. Let's move on to verbal sign, which is 50-12. So we are starting on 50-12 seconds. So so for rising sign, this is happening in your 11th house. Your social circles, professional networks, alliances, and your long-term dreams. So dream is something better, something to do with protection, right? I want to be friends. I want to be helping, community involvement, and so on. But then during these transits, you reevaluate whether I belong to the right group, or whether I am being supported by my friends, or whether it's worth supporting those friends or social circles, right? You're going to start looking at whether those social circles that you are part of, or the long-term dream that you have been kind of like dreaming of, whether they truly give you that genuine sense of safety and mutual care, or you are kind of like just this caretaker for your friends and organizations and so forth. So Ceres comes here and then exposes this uneven dynamics in your alliances. And therefore, you might be pulling out of a superficial type of group, and I'm going to be focusing on something different, like a trusted friendship, for example, that offer real substance, somehow with the shared values. Now, we've got Ceres in square to Neptune and Saturn in your 8th house, right? Which is the house of shared finances, joint investments, debts, psychology, and vulnerability, and even crisis as well. So, with the square to Neptune, it's the boundaries between your social life and your financial, emotional commitments. There's no line, somehow there is no separation there. So something becomes murky. So this is an invitation to be careful about, I don't know, joining certain type of financial ventures with friends or organizations and so forth, going into kind of like a group investments. But also these emotional boundaries in close alliances can become slightly bit blurred. And I get confused over who owes what. And then now it's squaring Saturn as well, right? Which is surely a sobering moment, a sobering emotional financial reality check. So Saturn in the 8th house demands to be accountable around debts and taxes and partners funds and deep trust. One scenario that comes to my mind is that a friend of mine is telling me to do X and Y, and because it worked for them, but what works for them doesn't always work for us as well. So you're gonna have to be kind of like having to think about, whether you are going to be you are going to follow the suits of someone else, which might have worked for them, but it might not be working for you. Right? It feels like that you have to be setting these firm boundaries around money and resources involving friends and group projects, and so that you are not ending up carrying this heavy joint burden alone. How many times I have heard that someone took a loan for a friend of theirs and then the friend disappeared. So this could be a scenario, for example, with this square. Let's move on to Libra rising sign 5418. So Libra, this is happening in your 10th house, the house of career, public standing, professional status, long-term legacy. And, this is about how I show up as a leader, how I show up as a provider, you know. So during this retrogression, it's about redefining your professional fulfillment. It's about pursuing career goals that genuinely nourishing your soul, or am I just operating on kind of like an autopilot out of the need for approval or simply money or security? right? So Ceres here can bring public recognition for your caretaking, for the support work, even for your managerial skills as well. But that retrograde phase will highlight where the professional demands are kind of like bleeding into your personal life. And therefore, you might be asked, for example, by your real partner, to adjust the workload, to reevaluate your business partnership, or to change how you nurture your clients and team so that you don't burn out. Why? Because we have got the square to Saturn and Neptune in your seventh house, which is the house of clients relationship. So this is when work can bleed into your personal life, such as it could be affecting your relationship. With Neptune, for example, these could be vague agreements in business or even in your personal partnership that could create friction. So be mindful of signing contracts or someone who is making you these grand promises they might not be able to fulfill, or dynamics where codependency kind of like blurs your professional boundaries. And then Saturn comes into the picture, the planet of accountability, right? And then Saturn is like, let's be legally sound, let's have legal clarity over this. It's about, I want this client or partner to kind of commit, right? So if a spouse or a business partner or a key client of yours kind of like isn't pulling their weight, or is just kind of like placing unfair demands on your career, then basically this is going to be about hard conversations and formal boundaries so that we can restore the balance. Let's move on to Scorpio rising sign 5709, please. Thank you. So for Scorpio, this is happening in your ninth house, the house of expansion, higher education, spiritual philosophy, publishing, travels, belief systems. So throughout this extended stay of Ceres, you are guided to nourish your mind through expansion, through expanding your horizon. So Ceres might encourage you to seek out studies or teaching or writing or travel opportunities that genuinely feeds your spirit. Well, with this retrogression, long held beliefs, academic path, or international plans may go through a bit of a revaluation or kind of like a bit of a mishap here. So you might realize that certain philosophies or certain mentors or certain travel plans, something that you once you have relied on, no longer offer you that emotional nourishment. So then I'm going to start looking for something more of an authentic truth. Like imagine that you have been studying with an organization for a very long time and they have offered you really valuable information before, but somehow I'm feeling disconnected from them right now. And that could be the series where I'm reevaluating. I want to be loyal because it's Cancer, but at the same time, I also need adventure as well. Now, and this is where the squares are coming into the picture with Saturn and Neptune in your sixth house, which is your work, health routines, physical body maintenance, the service that I provide or I receive, right? So imagine that you are dissatisfied with the service that a mentor of yours is giving you. Or imagine that your clients are kind of like dissatisfied with the service that you provide to them. So we're going to have to kind of like re-nurture our ways of working, right? So with Neptune, of course, we can have grand ideas. We can have these very distant travel plans, but it could be clashing with your day-to-day physical realities or even health limitations. So try to avoid idealizing really far off solutions, you know, because it's very easy with Neptune to neglect our daily wellness and work environment or even kind of like the physical health protocols as well. Because maybe a guru of ours tells us that, oh, you can heal, I don't know, cancer, for example, just by taking this herb. And then you can believe that. What if that herb doesn't work? You know, or you go to the doctor and then you tell the doctor that you would like to try this alternative therapy. And then they tell you, don't do that. So there is an invitation here to be able to listen to your gut feelings as well, because the body speaks to you. However, Saturn is there as well, which is about rigorous, structured work habits and strict health management. So let's say you would like to lose weight, but that series tells you that you're going to have to change your belief system about the way you feed your soul as well, right? Or, there could be a lot of administrative details and physical work loads that is somehow burning your mind out. So let's move on to Sagittarius rising sign. That would be 010108, please. 010108. So this is happening in your eighth house, which is your shared finances, debts, inheritances, emotional intimacy, psychological processing. So with Ceres being here, it's on one hand, it's a deep audit of your emotional trust, of your shared resources. Ceres governs how we give and receive. So in the eighth house, are your financial or emotional partnerships balanced? Or are you carrying an unfair share of kind of like burden? Because it's very easy to give as much as we can to others, but when it's not reciprocated, then unfortunately it becomes a burden after a while, right? Now, this could be an indication, for example, that you have to be handling a lot of issues around family estates or tax matters or joint loans, or how your partner is managing money. Emotionally old wounds around vulnerability or the fear of loss could be popping up. So there is a square to Neptune and Saturn, which is happening in your fifth house. So with Neptune, this is an emotional, financial boundary confusion. Imagine scenarios where you are giving money to your children every single week. And then Saturn says you're going to have to be drawing a hard line there. While Neptune is that, yes, but I would like to help my children. So the eighth house is the living conditions of my children because it's four sign away from the fifth. So it might be bringing you scenarios where you're ending up having to pay the rent or the mortgage, for example, for your children and so on. But Saturn says you're going to have to draw this hard line. So, but also it could indicate that when it comes to speculative risk or structured responsibilities, regarding a creative project and children, we just have to be able to have a sobering moment. So I'm going to have to apply certain type of financial rules around joint assets, so that personal pleasure or family expenses kind of like don't drain your long-term security. So be cautious about pouring shared financial kind of reserves into something risky or ungrounded ventures, or even idealizing romantic partners who might not be financially transparent with you. Let's move on to Capricorn rising sign. So that would be 010422. If you can please pop that in. So Capricorn, this is happening in your seventh house, your one-on-one partnership, relationship, marriage, business partnership, your clients and your enemies as well at the same time. So during this long stay of Ceres and retrogression here, it's a review of your partnerships. So are your one-on-one relationships providing you with care, mutual care? Do I feel safe next to this person? Or have I had to have I stepped into this maternal caretaking role with to my partner or to my clients as well? Someone who might be taking advantage of your reliability. So Ceres rhetoric comes here to pause you for a second to rebalance the scales. And yes, this can create some passive aggressive patterns as well, and unspoken resentment and codependent habits within those close partnerships and relationships. But this is a period of time when you have to be establishing healthier boundaries around how support is given and received. Now, we've got the square to Saturn and Neptune in your fourth house. So there is a family baggage that can spill into your relationships, key relationships, unclear living arrangements, or counting on a family member who might disappear, for example, or unaddressed domestic issues that can create misunderstandings between you and your spouse, or certain type of family secrets could come to light as well, which I haven't mentioned to my partner or they haven't mentioned to me. And then we've got Saturn in the picture, and Saturn is about reality check. So that's about the heavy structural work on your home, on your living situation, on family responsibilities. And this could bring a bit of a conflict, right, between what a partner needs from you and what you are kind of like having to deal with at home, how you are managing your home environment, such as raising the kids, taking care of dinner, and all those type of stuff, or having to take care of my elderly parents, and so on. So this is a rebalance of your one-on-one relationships. I know someone is going to ask me, what if I don't have a relationship? Then the answer is that you're going to have to be able to invest in your emotional foundation as well as self-care so that finally you can step into a relationship. And maybe that series is going to tell you that you haven't processed a lost relationship before. And we're going to have to revisit the past. We're going to have to confront the fears around not being in a relationship. And I know some of you will say, yeah, Victor, but I don't even want to have a relationship. That's completely up to you. But the seventh house is not just romantic relationship. And we might want to be able to remember that. So now let's do Aquarius rising sign. That's 010753, please. Aquarius, this is happening in your sixth house, which is daily work, health, physical wellness, service to others, and service to us as well. So I think you are being called to overhaul your daily wellness and work routines. If you have been running on an empty kind of stomach, you have been running on empty, tank, then it's, or you have been taking on an excessive workplace duties, or using comfort foods or irregular routines to be able to cope with stress, then Ceres here brings that habit to light. And it says we're going to have to streamline our daily workflow. We're going to have to upgrade our diet. We're going to have to establish a certain type of hygiene in our lives, right? We're going to have to be setting boundaries around our workplace availabilities as well. And there is that square to Saturn and Neptune in your third house, which with Neptune, it's very easy to have mental fatigue and miscommunication with co-workers, or certain type of ungrounded thinking that can disrupt your daily work or health routines. So beware of taking on vague tasks, or imagine that you are receiving these unclear instructions. And then, of course, you might be making a mistake with the sixth house. And then with the retrograde, you're going to have to go back and fix the mistake. So this is an invitation to make sure that you ask questions about the details. But also, those anxious mental chatter that, for example, you are telling yourself that I'm never going to be able to lose weight, I'm never going to be able to get better, and so forth. So with Neptune, if the mind is kind of calibrated on a giving up mode, then of course we're never going to get better. So then Saturn comes into the picture, and it says mental discipline, clear communication. All those are super required and important. We're going to have a better structured thinking, setting clear boundaries with those siblings, neighbors, and let's focus on schedule that, I don't know, my sister cannot just pop up at the door at their own convenience, right? So I'm going to have to put strict limits on my daily availability. You're going to have to draw the line that, I don't know, between 6 to 8, I've got yoga class and I don't want to be working at that time. And please don't call me around that time, right? Because something is draining your local obligations might be draining your physical body. And last but not least, Pisces rising sign, that would be 01/11/07. So this is happening in your fifth house, the house of creative projects, romance, children, personal pleasure, authentic self-expression, right? So you are invited to reconnect with what truly feels authentic, or what feeds your creative heart. So, are you allowing time for yourself for genuine play or rest, or artistic creation, or have your hobbies and personal joy turned into kind of like chores, and I'm having to do it? Like if you have children, this cycle highlights your parental dynamic, and then maybe I have to be choosing a better way of raising my children, or I have to be encouraging healthier emotional boundaries, supportive routines. In romance, Ceres retrograde really ask you to evaluate whether your romantic partner offer true emotional safety, or maybe that person is just a temporary distraction. And then there is the square to Neptune and Saturn in your second house, which is your finances, your assets, your self-worth. So with Neptune, financial vagueness or idealizing romantic kind of creative endeavors can create instability. So be cautious of overspending on leisure, children, boyfriends and girlfriends, or ungrounded creative projects that we can be chasing with that, because under the illusion that money will figure itself out later. Saturn says, no, it will not figure it out itself later on. We're going to have a strict budget. We're going to have financial boundaries with these children, romantic partners, and so forth. So, this is about disciplined financial planning, realistic resource allocation. And I'm going to have to set very clear practical limits on how much money and energy I invest into that partnership, into that creative risk, into that entertainment device, and so forth. Because somehow Saturn says financial security, self worth, self love come first. So this would be the breakdown for Ceres for all 12 signs. Any questions, anyone? Thank you, Erika, for all the timestamps. I really hope that this is going to be popping up actually on the feed, but I think it should be popping up. So, any questions, anyone? Series is going to be an interesting one for us, I believe. But if you need a certain type of personal guidance, for example, or you need a reading, then go ahead and book a reading with me. Obviously, what I would recommend is that you're going to have to be looking at where Ceres is in your natal chart. So, for example, Ceres transits now my fifth house, but natally Ceres is in my first house. So, of course, the physical body is moving into the house of creativity, romanticism, and sport as well. So, the natal placement of a planetary body gives you additional meaning. So that's where, of course, I am unable to tell you exactly what you might experience during the next 9 months, because every single of us have got Ceres somewhere else. All right, guys, then I think you are going to be seeing me potentially tomorrow as well. Or yes, because we're gonna have to talk about Vesta and Pallas Athene going retrograde in the sign of Aries. So see you very soon.